While shooting some low-quality ammo, I was waiting on some other people to range and saw that a Sig P320 bent extractor video came back up on a Discord server. My first thought was, isn't this old? I thought I saw this in March or something. After some arguments, I decided that I should probably do some testing. But before I show that, I'm just going to go over some quick definitions. When I refer to the chassis, I am referring to what is legally the receiver. When I refer to the handguard, sometimes I could call it the frame, sometimes I could call it the handguard. Really, it's just that piece of plastic that goes around the actual firearm. So, observations in my 2024 produced Sig M18 versus that Sig Legion, and also the Beretta that I've been comparing my Sig to for my whole review. In the case of my 2024 produced Sig M18, the chassis wraps around both sides of the magwell and hugs the flared portion of the magazine. However, there is still some play between the mag and the chassis itself. This contrasts to the Glock, which does not have a chassis. Its chassis and frame are the same thing, and all parts eventually just connect to the plastic bits. This appears to have a notch on one side of the magwell that can interface with a particular piece of plastic on the injection molded magazines. SIG does not, however, have plastic body magazines. They have stamped steel magazines, much like a Beretta or most other firearms. Over-insertion protection in the SIG appears to be integrated into the bottom of the frame, both at the top of the floor plate of the magazine itself, where that meets the bottom of the frame, and the chamfered middle section in the frame and mag itself. Both of those stop the magazine and keep it from over-traveling on the 3 OEM magazines that came with my gun. This compares perfectly with my Beretta, which does exactly the same thing. The bottom of the magazine is the stop for the magazine itself. That's your over insertion. On inspection, my extractor is both horizontally and vertically offset of the magazine feed lips. It is offset up and to the left if you're looking at it with the muzzle facing away from you. The first practical test that I did was to attempt over insertion on partially loaded magazines. The 17 round one was loaded to 15, and both of the 21 round magazines were loaded to 20 rounds. Because sometimes the intrusive thoughts are just the OCD telling you need to keep everything divisible by 5. I found no bends or breaks, even after hitting the bottom of the magazine hard enough to override the slide catch and cause the slide to go forward. On the second practical test, I did the same thing. However, this time I loaded all of the magazines fully to see if a full stack of bullets that bottomed out on the followers could bend the ejector. I also wanted to see if I could get some wiggle action in the holes to maybe hit the ejector from an unexpected angle. And I still got no bends. After finishing the test and 250 rounds of cheap steel-cased ammo, I checked the extractor for wear marks in case there was a slight bend that caused it to rub on the slide. I found no wear marks or rubs on the top of the extractor or on the associated portion of the slide. So comparing this to a Beretta M9, the Beretta's extractor is actually in line with the feed lips. It isn't offset like the SIGs are. However, I think over-insertion. I don't think over-insertion would have been a problem with that because of how short the stock 17-round magazines are. And even if a high-cap magazine was put into a Beretta, the extractor is actually a lot beefier, a lot more solid in that than it is in a SIG, and it's also connected to a metal frame, which is probably the other really important part. After trying to recreate the issue and not succeeding, I decided to go back and see if there was any research that I could find to tell if there was an M18 slash M17 specific recall or complaints versus SIG P320 on the M17 and M18. The only news sources that I found on malfunctions were a Army Times article from February of 2019 and some associated articles that reported the information from this later in that year. No bent extractors were part of that reporting. They did, however, have other weird issues such as uh, uh, magazine spring follower geometry and internal components, along with fixing an issue in the early production run non-prototype M17s that created a unique type of double feed slash double extract jam. And this was also separate to the initial voluntary recall of pistols that they did for the drop safe issues. On looking into the magazines, a SIG employee informed me that Mechgar manufactures their OEM magazines, or SIG OEM magazines, and after looking, about all I was able to do was find the inside or find that the inside bottom portion of mine were stamped with 241048. I'm assuming that means they were made in 2024, but can't tell because that's clearly not a date. I have not been able to pair that up with any others to figure out if there is a manufacturing date either. And outside of that, for magazine issues, I found some forum posts specifically for police SIG P320s referencing bent extractors in 2019, but couldn't find any news on it, recall information, or really even just people talking about it in reviews. After trying to find information outside of social media posts, I went to the original Discord post that this kind of just came from, which was a Twitter post from May this year showing a P320X Legion breaking with a 17-round mag, which was a re-upload of the same video from March of this year, which was a re-upload of the same video from January of this year. So I was wondering why that came back in about 2 months. Said poster also had multiple uploads and re-uploads of videos showing the same Legion having compatibility issues with a mix of both OEM and non-OEM mags. And his original post on that was in 2023. This compatibility issue seems obvious in hindsight to me because from what I can tell, the bottom of the frame is the over travel stop for the SIGs, or those SIGs in particular. He's also created one other video on stealth updates between an original 2017 manufacturer 21 round SIG P320 magazine and a 2020 manufacturer 21 round magazine. In the video, he compared them with calipers and found that the unsafe ones have an approximately 8.5 millimeter chamfer depth versus an approximate 7 millimeter chamfer depth on the newer one. He doesn't go into any more detail, and he also doesn't show any manufacturing information on those magazines. Unfortunately, he doesn't find or verify any manufacturer info on these, so I can't tell if they came with specific guns, were sold to him at a store, or were even both original OEM magazines. And then things got even more complicated when I decided to look around.
What people were doing with the mags is they were putting aluminum or anodized aluminum base pads on them. Well, we talked to Henning Group and we had these special base pads made. They are Legion made base pads. You can see the engraving there on the bottom. The gun's going to come with 3 of these. Now that's an accessory that costs a lot of money and they're going to come standard on the gun. Now what's great about these is they work with and without the magwell. So obviously this gun comes with the standard X5 removable magwell. In some competitive shooting disciplines, you cannot use a magwell, you have to take it off.
So in conclusion, I have more questions now and even less answers. I'm pretty sure the M17 and M18 series of pistols are actually different enough to just not call them P320s anymore. Bent extractors weren't part of the military-specific revision, and my experience with them is that the stock Mechgar magazines interface with them normally. Normally, as in the base plate touches the frame, and the frame acts as a stop. The Legions have very different magazine well geometries from the military guns, and just going to their website in current year brings up both possible and definite incompatible magazine setups between the entire lineup. Social media sources aren't consistent either, as the same author has said that all 21-round magazines have the issue, then posts a video of 17-round mags doing it in his gun. In order to test the magazine revisions, I would need to find used Mechgar manufactured magazines, note their manufacturing marks, and measure them in a specific gun, preferably my 2024 manufacturer M18. Testing the frames and magwells, however, would be impossible. Having the bottom of these magwells mate consistently across the entire fleet of designs is a critical requirement, but somehow SIG's designers wanted to make at least 3 unique contours. So the only definite conclusion that I have is if you buy aftermarket magazines, test them first. I don't know, maybe in 6 months to a year I'll have a whole bunch of aftermarket SIG magazines that I can look at.